Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Brett. I'm 33 years old, a mechanic in a small town that most maps forget to name. My hands are always dirty, my shirts always smell like grease, and my soul, it's been bruised for as long as I can remember. I live, or used to live, with my family in a weather-worn house that creaks like it's constantly complaining. But no house ever felt as cold as mine. My father, Richard, made sure of that. To him, I was never a son. I was a mistake. A stain. A burden. The lowly mechanic, he'd mutter loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Even now, I can still hear the sound of his voice behind my ears when I try to sleep. My mother, Lorraine, was the only warmth in that house. Quiet, kind, and always tired. Tired in the eyes. Tired in her bones. She never stood up to him, not really. But sometimes, when Dad barked insults and I stared at my plate of cold food, she'd reach under the table and gently squeeze my hand. As if to say, I'm here. And Daniel? My younger brother by 7 years, he was the golden boy. Went to college, got a job in the city, and came back wearing suits and smugness. Dad adored him. Everything I wasn't, Daniel was. Sharp. Polished. Approved. I was just, grease-stained Brett. Every family gathering felt like a knife fight where I brought a toothpick. The laughter they shared didn't include me. The pride in Dad's voice when he talked about Daniel never once pointed in my direction. Once, when I was 12, I asked Mom if Dad loved me. She hesitated. Then smiled and ruffled my hair. But didn't answer. That silence became a wound that never healed. I tried. Lord knows I tried. I fixed cars until my back screamed. I paid bills no one thanked me for. And still, when Daniel came home for holidays, I was the one cleaning dishes while they toasted champagne. Then came the call that changed everything. I was at the garage, elbow deep in a busted carburetor when my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I wiped my hands and answered. "Is this Brett?" a nurse asked. "Your mother's just been admitted. You should come. It's serious." My legs went cold. My hands numb. I dropped the wrench and ran out the shop like I was being chased by fire. The hospital was small, sterile, and somehow suffocating. When I walked into the room, I saw her, Mom, lying pale and breathless beneath wires and IVs. She looked like she was disappearing by the minute. She opened her eyes for a moment. Smiled. And whispered, "Brett." That's when she told me everything. And nothing would ever be the same again. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free, it burns everything you've ever known to the ground. Mom's voice was like wine through brittle leaves, fragile, faint, and fighting time. Her hands trembled as she reached for mine. "Brett," she whispered, "I have to tell you something before it's too late. Something I've carried for 33 years. I leaned closer. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with guilt. "You're not Richard's son." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. But her expression didn't waver. The words echoed through me, as if someone had yanked the floor out from under my feet. "What?" I whispered. She nodded, slowly. "I met someone before your father. I worked for a wealthy family in Eldridge City. I was young, poor, cleaning floors and folding sheets. He was the son of the estate, the heir. William Carver." That name hit like a punch. I'd heard it. Everyone in the state had. William Carver, the millionaire property magnate, whose face was in newspapers and TV interviews. He loved me, Brett," she continued. "Truly. But when I got pregnant, his parents threw me out. Paid me hush money. I tried to tell him, but they cut me off. I ran. I was scared, ashamed, and alone. She coughed, her body trembling. I squeezed her hand tighter. I married Richard because I thought I needed to. He knew I was pregnant. But he agreed. I thought he'd love you. But he didn't. He never did. I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in. My entire life, every insult, every cold stare, every time Dad spit lowly mechanic like it was poison, it all made sense now. I wasn't his. I had never been his. He took out everything on you, she said softly. Because you reminded him you weren't his. I tried, Brett. I tried to protect you. My vision blurred as I cried silently. Mom motioned weakly toward a faded canvas bag on the bedside table. In there, she murmured. There's a letter. And an address. Proof. William Carver's address. I've kept it all these years. I stood slowly, walked to the bag, and opened it. Inside was a yellowed envelope. Inside that, a paternity test, a photo, and a handwritten letter with the words. To William Carver, Eldridge City, Oakwood Road. From Lorraine. About our son. I stared at the name, William Carver. Was he still alive? Did he even know I existed? Was I, really his son? I turned back. Mom had fallen asleep, a peaceful expression softening her features. The monitors beeped quietly, counting seconds I couldn't afford to waste. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the hospital chair, replaying every memory of my childhood like a broken record, only now with new meaning. Every cruel word from Richard. Every laugh Daniel aimed at me. Every time I wondered why I didn't belong. And now I knew. I was never meant to belong. They knew. They all knew. Except me. And now Mom was dying. The only person who ever loved me, who ever tried, was slipping away with every breath. I looked out the window into the night and made a vow. I would find William Carver. I would find out who I really was. But not to ask for money or name. I wanted the truth. I wanted to see if the man who made me, could even look me in the eye. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to burn every lie down on my way there. The truth doesn't always knock. Sometimes, it kicks down your door wearing $1,000 suit. The next morning, Mom slipped into a coma. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. Prepare yourself, he said, like he was reading from a script he'd used too many times before. But I didn't cry. Not then. I took the yellowed envelope from her bag and walked out of that sterile room, into the open air that felt heavier than the walls I'd just escaped. By noon, I had packed a change of clothes, cleaned the oil from my fingernails best I could, and borrowed a pressed shirt from Sam, the garage owner who'd always treated me like a person. I took my beat-up motorcycle and rode. Eldridge City was 2 hours away, but the road felt infinite. As the red dust of my town faded in the rearview mirror, I realized something strange. I wasn't nervous. I was angry. Not the kind of anger that rages. The kind that smolders. The kind that simmers behind every thought. The kind you carry for 33 years without knowing why. Oakwood Road was exactly like I pictured, wealth dripping from every gatepost and wrought iron fence. Manicured hedges. Immaculate driveways. Houses that looked more like boutique hotels. Then I saw it. The Carver estate. A white mansion with red-tiled roofing and pillars that looked like they belonged in a museum. A brass plaque read, Carver. I parked outside and walked up to the gate. There was a call button on a marble pillar. I pressed it. My fingers trembled. A voice crackled through the intercom. Yes. I cleared my throat. My name is Brett. I'm Lorraine's son. I have something for Mr. William Carver. It's important. Silence. I was ready to be turned away. Then the gate buzzed open. A butler met me at the door. Not just a man in a suit, a presence. He led me down a long hallway filled with chandeliers and oil paintings that probably cost more than my entire garage. Then he opened a door. And there he was. William Carver. Older, but not fragile. His hair was salt and pepper. His suit tailored. His eyes sharp, green and piercing, like he'd learned to measure a man in one look. He stared at me. I stared back. "You said." "Lorraine?" he asked. I nodded and stepped forward, offering the envelope with both hands. "She said you should have this." He took it with a slow, practiced movement, as if the weight of secrets wasn't new to him. Then he opened it. And as he read the paternity document, the photo, and her letter, something shifted in his face. Shock. Recognition. And finally, grief. His hand trembled. "I looked for her," he said, voice cracking. "They sent her away. Told me she vanished. I didn't know she had a son." I couldn't speak. My jaw locked, my throat tight. He looked up. "You're my son." There it was. No test. No hesitation. Just 3 words that tore a 33-year-old hole through my chest. "My mother's dying," I said quietly. "She told me everything. And she wanted me to find you." He set the papers down. "Take me to her," he said without pause. "Now." We drove through the hills back to my town. I watched him grip the steering wheel like it was holding his past together. And for the first time, I saw a man break, not because he was weak, but because he had finally remembered what it meant to care. We reached the hospital just before sunset. Mom was still unconscious. But William knelt by her bed, took her hand, and whispered like a man who hadn't stopped loving. "Lorraine, it's me. I'm here. I found him." Her eyes fluttered open. And when they saw us both, tears fell. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. In that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt like part of a family, not because of blood, but because of truth. She passed that night. Peacefully. With her hand in mine, and the man she once loved on her other side. And I swear. She smiled as she slipped away. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking back through the door they slammed in your face, with power. After Mom's funeral, I wasn't the same. I couldn't be. I'd watched the only person who ever protected me take her last breath. But I'd also discovered who I really was, and for the first time, I wasn't ashamed of my name. Not Brett, the mechanic. Not Brett, the burden. Brett Carver. Son of William. Son of Lorraine. And that changed everything. William kept his word. He stood beside me at the funeral. He introduced himself to the pastor. He even helped carry Mom's casket. But the moment that changed everything happened in the church, when Daniel stood up to interrupt my eulogy and publicly humiliate me. I'd felt the rage rising, that old wound burning again. But before I could respond, William walked in like thunder. He said 6 words that froze the entire town. "This is my son. My blood." And suddenly, the man who'd always been invisible, was the only one that mattered. I saw Daniel's face go pale. I saw Richard's hand tremble. They couldn't deny it anymore. They couldn't pretend I was just the mechanic who tracked grease through the house. Not when a billionaire stood beside me and said, "He is mine." After the service, William and I returned to the mansion. The drive back was quiet. Heavy. But the kind of heavy that turns into clarity. I looked at him and said, "I want to do something." He nodded. "What is it?" I took a breath. The kind of breath you only take when you're finally about to become who you were meant to be. "I want to reclaim everything they took from me." He nodded again, slow and calm. Good. Because it's time. Phase 1, the will. Before she passed, Mom told me she had a will. I didn't know where it was, but William made a call to one of his attorneys. Within a day, they found it in the county clerk's office, uncounted, unclaimed, and ignored. Turns out, Mom had split the house. Half to Daniel. Half, to me. Not Richard. Not the man who raised me. She had left a letter with it too. One the attorney read aloud. To my son Brett. I am sorry I could never protect you from the storms. I hope this gives you something, not for the past, but for your future. You deserve more than this house. You deserve truth, freedom, and peace. And if Richard or Daniel ever try to take it from you again, fight back. Love. Mom. I cried like a child. And then, I stood up. Let's file it. Now. William smiled. I'll have my people handle it. Phase 2, the reputation shift. In my hometown, perception is currency. For 33 years, I was just the guy in oil-stained jeans. So William had an idea. He invited a few very public figures to visit Eldridge. Developers. Business owners. A journalist from the local paper. And then he took me with him. Introduced me as his apprentice. His son. The future of Carver Holdings. People started whispering. Then asking. Then smiling when they saw me. Old man Grady from the hardware store said, "Didn't know you were related to the Carvers. Why didn't you say anything, son?" I just smiled. Because I had said something. With every scar on my hands. With every night I spent fixing their cars for scraps. They just never listened. Phase 3, the confrontation. The final step. Facing Richard and Daniel. I didn't need revenge with fists. I had something better. One morning, they came to Eldridge. Showed up at the gate of the Carver estate, trying to smile, trying to act like we were still family. I walked out and met them at the entrance. Didn't even invite them in. Brett, Richard said, forcing a smirk. We just wanted to check in. Heard you were doing well. Daniel added, Look, man, we've had our differences, but... I held up a hand. You treated me like garbage for 33 years. They froze. You humiliated me at Mom's funeral. You mocked me for years. And now you show up because you know who I am. I stepped closer. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not giving you a chance to redeem yourselves. I'm just telling you, we are not family. I pulled out a legal notice. William's lawyers had filed a motion to force the sale of the house under the will. Half was mine. And I was selling. I'll send you your half of the sale, I said. But after that, don't ever come near me again. Richard looked stunned. Daniel looked like someone had punched him. I turned and walked back to the mansion. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. They thought they buried me. They didn't know I was a seed. Once the will was enforced and the sale of the house finalized, I didn't feel guilt. Not even a flicker. Because for the first time, I was standing on land that was mine. Not stolen. Not borrowed. Not begged for. Mine. The final chapter of my past was sealed the day that weather-worn house was listed and stripped clean of everything Richard and Daniel had clung to. The day the realtor placed a "sold" sign in the yard, I drove by, not to gloat, but to witness the end. And there it was. The rusted gate where Richard used to bark at me to mow the lawn. The cracked driveway where Daniel once told me I'd never be anything but a dirt monkey with a wrench. Gone. All of it. Wiped clean. The Carver estate, by contrast, was bustling. William, Dad, as I'd started calling him in private, had already begun the process of transitioning parts of his company to include my name. Not for show. For legacy. I started training in property development. Shadowing meetings. Learning contracts. Signing off on deals with him at my side. But I never let go of my roots. On weekends, I still went to the garage. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because grease under my fingernails reminded me where I came from. Reminded me that I earned this. And people in town. They started to see it, too. The whispers changed. No longer, Brett, the mechanic. Now it was, Brett Carver, William's son. Funny how fast people change their tune when power changes hands. The final gear. But I wasn't done. Because there was one more injustice that hadn't been accounted for. Mom's memory. She was known around town as quiet. Weak. Just Richard's wife. The woman who stayed in the background. But I knew better. She was strong in the softest ways. She endured more than anyone should have. She sacrificed everything to protect a son she couldn't even acknowledge as another man's. I wanted the town to remember her not as someone who disappeared into Richard's shadow, but as someone who gave everything so her son could rise from it. So I started a foundation in her name. The Lorraine Project. It provided scholarships for young women from small towns. It offered job training for single mothers. And on its launch day, William and I hosted a community event in her honor, complete with a dedication plaque at the town library. Guess who showed up? Daniel. In a wrinkled shirt and forced smile. He came up to me, eyes darting at the cameras, pretending to be proud. "This is great work, man," he said. "Mom would have been proud." I looked him in the eye, steady and calm. "No. She would have been shocked to see you here." He blinked. And I didn't let up. "You never lifted a finger for her. Not when she was sick. Not even at the funeral. You only show up when the lights are on." He tried to defend himself, muttering something about, "We're still family." But I shook my head. "You stopped being my brother the day you laughed while Dad called me trash in front of the neighbors. You don't get to rewrite that." And I walked away. The cameras caught none of it. But the town saw everything. The letter. Later that night, I was organizing Mom's things when I found a second letter, buried inside a worn-out poetry book she used to keep near her bedside. It was addressed to me. "Dear Brett. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. I want you to know that loving you was never a mistake. Not for a second. I may not have protected you as fiercely as I should have, but I never stopped hoping you'd rise. And you did. Please don't waste your life proving your worth to those who couldn't see it. You were never meant to stay small. Love. Mom." I cried reading that. Ugly, guttural, unfiltered tears. But not from pain. From release. From knowing I was finally living the life she dreamed of, for both of us. Some truths bury the past. Others unearth a whole new battlefield. Things had been calm for a few weeks, almost too calm. The town had finally embraced me. The foundation was thriving. William had even introduced me at a corporate event as my son and future partner. It felt surreal. The kind of life I used to imagine while falling asleep to the sound of Dad yelling or Daniel laughing behind my bedroom door. But if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that peace never comes without a cost. And sometimes, the past isn't done with you yet. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. William was in a board meeting. I was in the library room of the mansion, sifting through old photo albums, mostly ones of his childhood, his family. I was starting to feel like I belonged in those pages. Like I could add my photo to the next chapter. Then the butler knocked on the door. "Sir," he said hesitantly. "There's someone here, claiming to be your half-brother." I blinked. "My what?" He stepped aside, and in walked a tall, well-dressed man, probably in his late 30s, with William's sharp features and that same commanding gaze. Except his eyes weren't warm. They were cold. Calculated. "Brett, is it?" he said, with a slight smirk. "I'm Maxwell. William's son. The one he didn't tell you about." I stood slowly, a sick feeling growing in my gut. He sat down uninvited and leaned forward, dropping a thick manila folder on the table. "Before you start celebrating the Carver legacy, you might want to read this." I opened the folder. And everything tilted. It was a copy of William's original will, dated years ago. In it, everything, was left to Maxwell. The estate. The company. The assets. The trust. There was no mention of me. Because back then, he didn't know I existed. Maxwell watched me like a snake watches a field mouse. "You see, I've been prepping for this empire since I was in diapers. Ivy League. Internships. International deals. And then you show up. Small-town grease monkey with an emotional story and an oil stain on your shirt." He leaned closer. "And now Daddy's giving you half of what I built my life around." I said nothing. Because honestly, I didn't know what to say. The ultimatum. When William returned, the tension in the room turned electric. He looked between us. His face paled. But he didn't deny anything. "Yes, Maxwell is my son," he said quietly. "From my first marriage. We've been estranged for years." Maxwell cut in. "You're going to fix this. Now. Either I get everything that was promised to me, or I go public. I'll drag your name through every court, every headline, every deal. You'll lose everything." I looked at William. He was silent. Shocked. But I could see something else behind his eyes. Not fear. Resolve. The turn. That night, William called me into his study. He handed me a thick binder of legal papers. "These are updated documents," he said. "My new will. My holdings. My business transfers." I opened it. My name was everywhere. And Maxwell's? Nowhere. I looked up, stunned. "But why?" He sighed and walked to the window. "I loved my first wife, but she raised Maxwell with entitlement, not integrity. I gave him everything, education, opportunity, resources. And he still turned out, hollow." He turned to me. You showed up with nothing. And still gave me something no one ever had." "What's that?" "Respect. Gratitude. Family." I swallowed hard. "I don't want to take what isn't mine," I said. William smiled. "You're not. You're earning what's yours. The rest? Let the lawyers handle it." The fall of Maxwell. Within a week, it began. Maxwell, furious and cornered, filed a lawsuit, but the new documents were airtight. The press caught wind, and soon headlines read, "Billionaire son battles secret heir, but the truth was deeper than blood." Investors backed me. Employees respected me. And when Maxwell tried to throw mud, it only stained his own hands. By the end of the month, he'd retreated to Europe, disgraced and disinherited. But me? I stood on the balcony of the Carver mansion one evening, staring into the skyline. Not as a guest. Not as a charity case. But as the future of the family. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with truth, finally heard, and peace, finally earned. 6 months after Maxwell's collapse, Eldridge was no longer unfamiliar to me, it was mine. And so was my past. But there was still one thing left to do. Something that had haunted me more than any insult, more than Richard's bitterness or Daniel's betrayal. I needed to honor Mom. The dedication. I worked with William and the Lorraine Project team to plan a town-wide event, one that couldn't be ignored, even by those who'd once looked right through me. We renovated the old public library and renamed it the Lorraine Carver Center for Hope and Learning. It would house career training rooms, parenting resources, even a mechanics workshop in the back. Everything Mom had quietly represented. Everything she never received. The grand opening drew a huge crowd. Neighbors, local reporters, even those who once whispered "lowly mechanic" under their breath now stood in line for a chance to shake my hand. But none of it mattered until they arrived. The final showdown. Richard and Daniel. I hadn't seen them since the house was sold out from under them. But there they were, standing in the back row, trying to blend in. Maybe they came for closure. Maybe they came to leech onto the last spark of relevance. But I didn't care why. Because when I stepped up to the podium, I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to the one person who never got to hear her name spoken with pride. Today, I began, voice steady, we honor a woman this town never truly saw. Lorraine Carver wasn't just a housewife. She was a warrior with a quiet heart. A woman who endured silence so her son could find his voice. This center is her voice now. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. And when I unveiled the bronze plaque, a lifelike engraving of Mom, smiling with soft, wise eyes, there was silence. Reverence. Then applause. Thunderous. And when I looked back, Richard was gone. But Daniel? He stayed. After the ceremony, he approached me slowly, looking older, smaller. I didn't know she meant that much to you, he said, eyes lowered. She meant everything to me, I replied. Daniel nodded, awkwardly, and started to leave. Wait, I said. He turned, surprised. I don't hate you, I said. I just don't need you anymore. He stared at me. Then nodded again, this time with real understanding, and walked away. And I didn't watch him go. Because he wasn't part of my story anymore. The true legacy. Later that evening, I sat with William in the garden of the Carver estate. The sky was lavender. The wind was soft. And for once, the silence between us wasn't painful, it was peaceful. You've changed a lot, he said. I haven't changed, I replied. I just, finally showed up. He smiled. You've made me proud, Brett. I looked out over the lawn, thinking of Mom. She was the best of us, I whispered. She still is, he said. And we both knew what he meant. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.